Welcome back to another story time with the Chittenango Landing Canal Boat Museum. I'm Miss Lindsay, and today we are continuing with our story, Minnie the Mule and the Erie Canal. Chapter 13, Leaving the City. Supper that night was exciting. Papa and his brother had arranged for a tow to pick them up the next day. They will pick us up about noon with a harbor tug and tow us up the North River near 52nd Street, where we will be tied to the stake boat that is anchored in the middle of the river. We will have to stay aboard because we will leave when the tide has swung us into position. I hope you all saw as much as you could today. I'm ready to go. I think I bought everything that could possibly fit into my cupboards. Abby laughed. How about you, Sarah? I could stay longer. There is so much to see. But I'll be glad to see Minnie, Maud, and Molly again. We will come back again, won't we? Probably many times. At least as long as the Erie Canal continues to operate and I have lumber to haul and orders to fill. The captain's face was sober for a moment. Some of the canalers I talked to while we have been here tell me that the demand for canal travel is becoming lighter because of the trains that are hauling freight and people. His brother grinned. But didn't they tell us, too, that the trains are unreliable? Their coal power keeps them in constant danger of fire. There are still a lot of passengers who would like to go by train because it is a little faster. But the danger from flying sparks and the dirt make them continue to use the canal and the packet boats. True. I hear there are 2 packet boats operating between here and Albany that offer a good ride, and they are full night and day. Captain John smiled. I didn't mean I thought we would be closing down any time soon. Pa, Jack and I saw Mike at the aquarium today with another man who kind of looked like Mike, except he had red hair. You know, like the bank robber we heard about. Her father burst out laughing. Sarah, you have the most vivid imagination of anyone I know. Are you sure it was Mike? We left him back in Watervliet. It was him, Uncle John, Jack agreed with Sarah. And he was with a man who looked just as Sarah says. Of course, I don't see how they could be working together. Mike has been on board our barges ever since we left Rome. I've been trying to tell her that. Well, we will have to see if he gets back to Watervliet in time to join us, if it was him. Captain John frowned. It will leave us short-handed if he does not show up. We could find someone else, couldn't we? I almost hope he does not decide to go back with us. Abigail frowned. I can't remember when I have met a meaner-tempered man. He will be back, Sarah declared. He has a big padlock on his room, and he said no one was to go in there because he left most of his stuff there. Time will tell, I guess. Right now, I think we had better get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow will be another busy day. The next morning, everything went just as the captain had predicted. The harbor tug took them out to almost the fully loaded tow, and before night fell, they were ready to start back towards Albany to Watervliet. Early in the morning, they passed by Riverside Park and caught a glimpse of its grandeur, where it could be seen close to the shoreline. A few miles outside of New York, they saw the beginning of the Palisades, rocky cliffs that could be seen for miles on the New Jersey shore near the west side of the Hudson River. Before they reached the end of them, they had passed Yonkers, Dobbs Ferry, Tarrytown, and Rockland Lake, all places that Sarah had heard about but had never seen. She had started a journal of this trip down the canal, and she scribbled furiously, making sure the names of the places they passed were spelled right. Late that afternoon, Paul called her up to sit with him on the deck so he could show her the towers of Sing Sing Prison. He told her how his father had told him about this place, where hardened criminals who had committed murders were put to death. Sarah shivered, picturing what that must feel like. Just before dark, they passed West Point Military Academy in plain view of this west side of the river. Her book was becoming full. They were still underway when she fell asleep that night. The next morning, they had reached the halfway point of Poughkeepsie. She was up on deck in time to see the only bridges crossing the Hudson River between Albany and New York. One was the railroad bridge crossing to Highland. Pa pointed out a lighthouse at Roundout Creek. He said the lighthouse beacon had guided tows entering the creek at night for years. When we get this far, I know we are getting close to Albany. He stretched and tapped the ashes from his pipe. Tomorrow we will be picking up the mules. Chapter 13. Back on the Canal. The next morning, they were towed past Kingston and found themselves once more in fresh water. Sarah's father pointed out the Knickerbocker Ice Company's ice houses, where blocks of ice could be purchased to fill their steel boxes and let them keep fresh meat and milk longer. A bumboat came along just as he was telling her. It was owned by the ice company, and Mama and Aunt Mabel took the chance to fill their boxes and buy fresh vegetables and fruit from another bumboat that closely followed the first one. Sarah munched a crisp apple as she sat on the roof of the cabin with Jack, watching the shoreline slip by. It will not be long before you will not be able to sit up there, her father warned them. Once we are locked into the canal, we will be seeing low bridges again. The sun was high in the sky when they approached Albany, on the opposite side of the Hudson River. A tug pulled them and the other canal barges, who did not want to wait in Albany's busy harbor, onto Waterfleet. As they approached the harbor, Sarah's sharp eyes found Teddy Anderson's tall frame on the shore. He saw her too, and waved vigorously. She fancied she could see his wide smile and his dimples. Look, Pa, there is Teddy, and there are our mules. You are right. The captain joined her at the rail, and her mother came hurrying up from the galley. Jack came nimbly across their little bridge and jumped down onto the deck. Pa wants to know, do you want to unlatch the bridge and stow it? I guess we had better. The captain waved to his brother. In just a short time, they had disconnected the big plank and put it back on the cabin roof. They drew into the shore, and their escort dropped them off. With a brief wave, the pilot of the small steam-powered boat turned and headed back to the middle of the river. They were ready to re-lock into the canal again. The landing ramp landed on the towpath, and Sarah was there to scamper down to the ground. Her legs felt shaky on firm ground after so long on the water, but she smiled at Teddy as he came running over to the barge. His father was just behind him. Hello, we thought you would be along this afternoon. Teddy's blue eyes were bright, and he looked happy to see them. Sarah could feel her cheeks getting warm again. I was surprised when I saw you waiting. She hesitated, not knowing what to say next. How are the mules? They are good. My pa is getting ready to help you load them. Her father and uncle and Jack had gone on to the wagon where the mules had all been tied to the tailgate, waiting for them. She had been so excited to see Teddy again that she had not noticed that they had gone on ahead of them. Your Hoggy is here too. My pa tried to talk to him, but he is not too friendly. Teddy grinned. Mike is here? We saw him in New York City. I didn't think he would make it back here in time. She giggled. I was kind of hoping that he wouldn't. There he is. Teddy pointed to a building at the back of the dock where they sold beer and whiskey. Sarah saw Mike come towards them. He carried a big canvas duffel sling over his shoulder, and he paused only a minute before mounting the landing ramp. Tell your pa I'm unloading my gear in my room, and I will be right back. He was not any friendlier than he had been before leaving them. I saw you in New York. How did you get back? Sarah blurted the words before she could stop herself. You did not see me in New York. I've been right here waiting for you. He swung around on his heel, his face red, and then hurried up the plank and dropped onto the deck. He is lying. Jack and I both saw him in the aquarium in New York City. Sarah shook her head in disbelief and turned as Pa and Jack came near with the first two mules. Didn't I just see Mike going aboard? Her father raised a dark eyebrow. You did. He says he was not in New York. She was indignant. Let's not worry about it right now. We need to get loaded and into the lock before it gets dark. He looked anxiously at the darkening sky. We need to get a start back to the farm as soon as we can, too. Neil Anderson agreed as he joined them, leading the last mule. Mike came down onto the towpath just then, and Captain Fairweather greeted him cordially. How was the vacation, Mike? Okay, I guess. His face was surly. I suppose you want me to take first shift. Yes. Why don't you harness Minnie while we load the others into the bow stable? It looks like we won't have a delay getting into the lock. They worked smoothly, and all too soon they were ready to board. Sarah hated to say goodbye to Teddy so quickly, and he shuffled his feet nervously before he reached into his pocket and took out a folded paper. It's my address. Would you want to write me a letter when you have time? She looked up at him shyly and nodded. Just a minute. She ran up the ramp and grabbed her journal from the roof of the cabin where she had left it. She put her name and address on a page and ripped it out of the book before she ran back to give it to him. In case you want to write too, I won't be home for a while, but we could both write and I would have a letter waiting for me when we get home. His face lit up with a grin. That is a great idea. I'll do it. Don't forget. I won't. She saw that they were ready to go, and Teddy's father called to him. Time to go, son. Reluctantly, she climbed the ramp, and her father pulled it in. Teddy waved once more and turned to go with his father. Pa chuckled. I do believe my little girl is growing up. He called to Mike where he stood next to Minnie on the path. Within a short time, they had been locked into the lock at Waterfleet, and Mike was on his way to meet them on the other side. Going to the bow as the gates swung open, Sarah saw that they were low in the lock, the walls high above them. Oh, I forgot Pa said we would be raised 8 feet or more in each lock until we get to that level stretch into Rome. By the time they reached the other side of the lock, they had been raised almost to the top of the walls. Her stomach churned from the upward movement, and they were gradually swelled out of the gates into the canal. Turning, she could see Uncle Dan's boat right behind them, following true on his tow line. The mules were reattached, and they were on their way again. That is it for today's story time. Thank you for joining us, friends. Join us tomorrow for the end of Minnie the Mule and the Erie Canal.